Stuart Weitzman,
Here I am.
footwear designer, founder of the eponymous company, noted ping pong hustler. Welcome to the Shoecast.
Champion also, not just hustler, but you are right about the hustling part.
Have you ever played with Susan Sarandon?
At the club in New York,
Yep.
yes, it's been, yeah.
Uh,
She's not involved now, but she was used to help promote it.
I got to play with John Starks there one time.
Do you know about the movie that's coming out with Gwyneth Paltrow?
I've heard a little bit about it, but fill me in.
Called Marty Smart. It's about a ping pong champion, the only American multiple world championship. Now the Chinese control it, you know. Marty Reason, talk about a hustler. He could knock the flame off a candle with a ping pong shot, and won many thousands of dollars doing that. So they've made this spectacular movie out of a ping pong guy. We're all anxious to see it.
Can't wait.
And I've played with a couple of the pros who they use to do the shots and then put, Marty's old head on him because he's not around anymore. It should be good. $100 million budget with Gwyneth Paltrow's
Ping pong movie.
That's right.
And you call it ping pong, not table tennis.
No, it's table tennis.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe shoes. Maybe we should do shoes too for this chat. Your life has been lived making, designing, selling women's shoes. But let's start with you. What shoes have you loved to wear or admired, kind of from the men's side throughout your life?
I'm not a have to buy this brand kind of guy. If it looked good, then I would try it on. So that the eye appeal helped me take it off the shelf. But if it didn't feel good, then I wouldn't buy it, no matter how cool it looked. And that was all through my teenage and college years, starting with that philosophy and that attitude. So when I started a company, the feel, the function, the fit had to be as important as the way they looked. And that was kind of unique in women's footwear. It is not in men's. It was in women's because women really, the Imelda Marcoses of the world, she had 3,600 pair or something when they finally threw her out.
Couldn't have all fit well.
Yeah, it didn't matter. It's how they looked. And most of the soles weren't even worn, by the way. She just couldn't help herself. So, yeah, we made something that wasn't available, function and fashion. And that was our DNA. And I think it was because that's how I purchased my product for myself.
Stylistically, what were you wearing in terms of, were you wearing long wings? Were you wearing a nice little blucher?
No, it was something that had a touch to it that wasn't traditional.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would buy. My dress shoes, well, they can be patent leather or silk, if it's a tuxedo affair, black tie affair. But if it's just nice dress up, the toe is a little different, maybe a little longer and not so not round, maybe a little soft, squarish. That's my favorite dress shoe. And I just like them to look a little different. Like them. That's how I kind of lived my life on the, not just in shoes, but life. It's on the road less traveled, I like to say, like the Robert Frost poem.
Yeah, that's a keeper. Listen to that man.
Mm-hmm.
So you grew up in an environment where shoes seemed unavoidable. And as I understand, you didn't work much for...
Well, my dad was in the footwear.
Mr. Seymour.
No, A.S. Beck.
A.S. Beck.
Which doesn't exist. It was a huge company, maybe 200 chain stores. They had their own factories, and my dad was the designer of the footwear that went in the stores, and he ran the store. He was responsible for the creative direction of the company. But it wasn't his, and he had enough talent for something to be his, so eventually, after 20 years or so, when my brother was old enough to help him, and out of school, he started his own. His wife, my mom, was glamorously shoed all the time. And there is a wonderful picture that my big bad brother took of me plotzing around the house in my mother's red patent leather high heel pumps as a 4-year-old, because my sister was doing it. You probably have seen little kids running.
Kids love to try on these
Yeah,
shoes.
right. So
they're slightly different.
But a little boy in a high heel red patent leather pump, where my whole foot is in the front and there's nothing in the back. Maybe that started my love of ladies' shoes.
We've talked a bunch on this podcast about Haverhill, Mass, and how it was just really this hub of American shoe manufacturing. And as I understand it, that's where your father's shoes, the Mr. Seymour shoes, were manufactured.
His factory was on Essex Street in Haverhill.
And that changed, and I'd love to get into how the American manufacturing scene shifted elsewhere. But what do you remember from growing up in that environment of shoe manufacturing in America, in Massachusetts?
Well, I didn't grow up in Massachusetts. We're New Yorkers. The factory was there. I was in school. And I only began to work there after I graduated from Penn, and worked with my brother most of the time because my dad passed away a year after I got out of school. I lived with footwear around me. I had no intention of going into the shoe business. My brother was a lot older than me and strong, big, and when you're 6 years or so older and you're a little kid against him, you don't think of yourself working with him because it probably would be under him. So I was going to Wall Street, quite honestly. But I worked summers there, keep myself busy. And then when my dad passed away, I took on the responsibility of creating the shoes to help keep it alive until my brother found some other thing he wanted to do, and I found something I wanted to do. So I did start creating product when I was about 22 for the factory, and sold some sketches to people a couple of years before that to make a little money on my designs while I was still at school. There's something interesting about if I can jump from growing up with shoes into when I really started in my early 20s. When you drive into Haverhill in that era, like every town, Haverhill founded 1723 or whenever it was, home of Louis B. Mayer. Of course, MGM, Mr. Mayer, he's from Haverhill. And his first theater was there, and he learned his trade there, and then he went to Hollywood with Sam Goldwyn, and off they went, creating that whole industry. I thought, can I do something here that maybe someday it'll be home of Stuart Weitzman? I really used to think that when I saw that sign. Boy, that's cool that he's got his name as home of Louis B. Mayer. And that sort of happened just a few years ago, because they're building a museum of footwear, and it's going to have as its shoe collection Stuart Weitzman's collection, a lot of which you see in the book Walk This Way, that photographed them. But they also created a mural on the side of a building, which is fronted with a parking lot, so it's very visible. There's no other building near it on that side. And it's a 4-story, huge mural. And Louis B. Mayer and 30-some-odd other Haverhillites have been painted as part of this picture, as people who have done something that's notoriety for the town. There are 4 baseball players, for example, in it. The first black woman firefighter in the United States from Haverhill on the fire brigade there. And there's Louis B. Mayer at his projector, projecting up on a screen that takes up half the photograph. Everyone's mini, except on the screen, is a shoemaker making a shoe. We call lasting a shoe, pulling the shoe over the form. And it was me. So there I am, up a home of Stuart Weitzman, right there in the center of town. So that happened.
You did it.
Cool. That was cool.
Do you remember the first pair of shoes that you drew or sold, as you mentioned? Like the sketches.
Well, which one? Drew or sold?
First pair of shoes that you drew that you remember.
Yes. It changed my career. I was at the Wharton School. It's in Philadelphia. I was going to Wall Street. That's why I went there. And a friend on campus said, he saw how I drew some sceneries, the scenery for plays that were put on by the dramatic club on campus, Mask and Wig it's called, sort of like Hasty Pudding at Harvard. He said, "Oh, you draw so nicely. You ought to draw some shoes for my father." I said, "Why do I want to do that? I never drew any shoes." He said, "Well, no, but you can you?" I said, "Sure I can, but why do you want me to draw them for your father?" He has a factory in Brooklyn, and he's a great shoemaker. Here I am at Penn, he got me here with his efforts, but he buys freelance for his designs outside. He buys from others. Maybe you should sketch him some. I asked for his dad's catalog so I could see the market that he was basically servicing and try to design something within that taste. And I drew 20 sketches. I went to his house over a weekend break from school with my friend there, his son, and the old man. And he said, "Oh, my son tells me you draw shoes." I said, "Well, I just did for you. You're my first possibility because it's the first time I've drawn them. But I got the ideas from your catalog." And he looked at one, picked one up. I kind of laid them out like you would a deck of cards. You fan them out. He pulled one out of the pile. And he said, "Who'd you copy this from?" And I hadn't, so, I didn't have an Adam's apple issue with that, choking up a little. I just said, I didn't, sir. I saw one of your shoes. It's in the book that I've returned here, and it inspired me to make this shoe. Well, he pulled it up to the chandelier over the dining room table. He says, "I'm sorry." He says, "I see an outline, impression of an outline. So I actually..."
You have tracing?
Yeah, traced it and then, whatever. And of course I didn't. And he did add, he said, "Look," he said, "I'm medium price. So I will make shoes that were made by others, with a little change maybe, because I'm only medium price, I'm not high price. But I need to know whose shoe I've been inspired by. So where'd this come from?" And I opened his catalog to his shoe. And he took that sketch and he tore it up into little pieces, bundled it up in a little ball and threw it on the floor. Now, I think we still say you can hear a pin drop. It was an expression we always use. You really can't hear a pin drop. That moment, you could hear a pin drop. I didn't know what to say. My friend's sitting there. And then about 10 seconds go by. He's letting us suffer. And he picked another one up. And I thought, oh, my God, where are we going here? And he said, "Are you going to tell me you drew this one on your own?" I said, "Yes, sir, I did."
To my story.
So he took that sketch and he flipped it over so the blank side was up and the sketch was down. Took a pencil out of his pocket and said, "Draw that for me again." Well, I went zip, 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 and I did, and he looked at it, and he flipped it over, flipped it back, and he saw I drew it. He said, "I'll give you $20 a sketch." He wheeled off 19 $20 bills. That was $380 for maybe an hour and a half in the late 60s. I mean, my goodness. My tuition was $1,700 for the year.
Almost there.
Yeah, and I get 380. By the way, the one he tore up, he didn't pay for. Still ticks me off today because I was such a dummy. I left it there. He probably scotch taped
Picked it up off the floor.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and assembled it and maybe used it. But you asked about the first shoe. Well, that summer of my junior year, before starting senior, I was walking on Fifth Avenue, and in the window of a store called I. Miller, the top high-grade store in New York. You couldn't be better. It's right across the street from Bergdorf Goodman. Today it's Bulgari, 57th and 5th. Is a 4 colors of a pump, a high-heel pump with a fluffy snake and leather bow. It looked like, well, maybe. So I pushed my nose up against the window to see the label in the shoe, and it was the label of that guy from Brooklyn. He made my sketch, and there it was on Fifth Avenue in the best store. I mean, I thought, like, what did Oscar Hammerstein think when he heard his first song on the radio in 1938 or whatever? Wow, this was exciting. And that's when I decided I was going to try the shoe business. So there was my first shoe. My sketch, he made it, and there it is. And by the way, when I went inside to ask about it, they told me they just reordered it. You know what that means, right?
I think that means it's a hit.
They had to buy it again, reordered it.
Yeah.
Sold out. Okay.
But how did you know how to do that? Like, that was
I always
the first
drew.
shoe you drew.
But I always drew. I had no trouble drawing.
Uh-huh.
And you could draw what you wanted to draw. And I looked at his sketches and the line of the arch and the heel, and most of his shoes were mid to high heel, so I didn't want to show him too many flats. I think 2 flats were in the 20 sketches, and I drew within his attitude. After that, I started my company. I drew within my own attitude, created my own signature, my own DNA.
So let's get to Stuart Weitzman, the company.
I was with my brother, first my father for a year, and then my brother for a few years. And the shoe industry ended. Nothing you could do about it. It was gone. So I wasn't, I had to find.
In terms of manufacturing in
America.
Massachusetts.
Yeah, it was over, or anywhere in America. And since I had learned so much about it, those few years were my graduate school, more than any university could have given me. After all, footwear is a craft. It's not like software or making pencils. It's a craft. 200 operations to make a good shoe, etc. So I wanted to keep that talent and that experience. I went to Europe with another company that was already there doing things in medium price, and I worked for them. And that was my graduate school, really.
As a designer?
As a designer, as a salesperson, as a factory manager overseeing the production as well. I did all jobs because I started a new division for them. They didn't have one in my grade of footwear. And I did everything for about 3 years, CEO and creative director. And then I started to hire people as it began to grow. I couldn't handle it all,
Reasonable.
And that's how I ended up in Spain.
What do you remember about kind of those last years of American footwear manufacturing? Like, that's what.
Well, I only knew our town and where I was. I didn't know there were other regions. St. Louis had a big shoe manufacturing. Maine had a fair amount. Also, Brockton made the men's shoes. But that area I was in made 40% of all women's footwear in the United States. 40% came from that little area. And the town Haverhill was written up in, I guess it was still the Globe 60 years ago or 50 years ago, as the town with more millionaires per capita than any other town in Massachusetts.
Because of the shoes. Not bad.
You make shoes for 30 years and you make $30 a pair, and it adds up and it adds up and it adds up. And that's what happened. But then the workers, who were the children of Italian immigrants mostly, they didn't want to come back into shoes. They saw opportunities at Raytheon, at Western Electric, at other technological and electronic companies that were sprouting up along Route 128 and elsewhere. And we couldn't get employees. And I said to my brother one day, I said, Warren, there isn't a stitcher here who's working legally. We're paying them all under the table because they're collecting Social Security. Now, is that where you want to place your future?
Yeah.
Because they're all 40 years older than us, and there's nobody replacing them. I'm leaving, so you can do whatever you want. And we decided, let's figure out in 6 months or a year who we can each find another job with. And we weren't the last factory to close, but close to the last. Maybe there were 3 left. It was the workers, by the way, that they were great, but they got old and no one replaced them. And that's why the industry closed.
Right. And that's the interesting part. I think that, the story, and there are still, like, Alden is still manufacturing in Massachusetts, and it's an absolute anomaly, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like kind of persistence for whatever reason. And like there is a market for an American made product specifically, even if it costs more. But the story is always that it was cheaper. it was cheaper overseas.
No,
so that's where everything went.
That's not the truth for footwear.
Yeah.
That's not why we went. Nobody went to China. It was only Italy and Spain, and they were pretty. I mean, the European community had just been built, and their wages were similar to ours. It was labor and materials and supplies. You couldn't find a heel maker. You couldn't find a sole maker in America. You couldn't. All the threads came from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you continue? How do you put all these dozens of products together when you have to import them all? No, it made more sense go to the source.
So what'd you see in Spain? What made you say,
well, I
do this here?
There were only two countries that made good shoes, and it was Spain and Italy. Italy had many more factories making wonderful shoes than Spain did, but Spain had enough for me to pick from anyway. I had learned Spanish very, very well in school and in college. Won scholarship to the University of Mexico, for example, because of my grades and my ability to speak and understand their literature. So Spain was easy. Italy, I knew a little bit. It's not hard to learn Italian if you know Spanish or vice versa. But, I went to Italy, and there was a 3-hour strike the first day I got there. I couldn't see the factory. The next day, there was a hotel strike, only 4 hours. They had the most ridiculous strike system.
They kick you out of the hotel?
There's nobody to clean your room or get any food or anything. So then I had gone to Spain before that, and the country was cooperative, disciplined. Unions were under government control. I thought, wow, this is a good system. So I stayed in Spain. And the people I went there with, that other company, bought the control of the best factory in that little town where the shoes are made. They bought it. The owner, it was good timing. The owner's 2 children were not business people. They were running the plant for the old man, and he knew they couldn't run it without him. And he thought, let me sell half of it to an American company to guarantee its production. And the firm I worked for bought it, and that became my home. And from there, I was with them 46 years, and we added 10 more factories. But that base is what started it for me in Spain.
Where in Spain?
A little town called Elda, E-L-D-A. Alicante is the main city, million population city, in the province of Valencia.
Yep. Kind of like a historic shoemaking center there.
Yeah. Elche, Elda, they have hundreds of factories, really.
And what do you see in a place like that? I mean, they have the factory and they have access to materials, but in terms of the people creating the shoes, knowledge.
Not Spanish. Most everyone came from Europe or America and used the shoemaking talent, but they couldn't find the creativity talent, so they brought it in. There were very few, even today, very few Spanish brand names in shoes that people would recognize.
Right.
For example, Manolo Blahnik is Spanish. He went to Italy to make his shoes. I can't name anyone with recognition like we had. I really can't today. So, but they were so easy for us and pleasant, and you could become their partner in the factory. They were not partner in the brand and the worldwide sales, but they did their job. We needed the Spanish owner to run the factory and to organize it, hire and fire, etc. And it was a wonderful collaboration. Still is today. Now, instead of Americans dominating the manufacturing there, it's Italians. They have brought better talent. They've taught Spain to make the shoes on Italian level. We can't tell the difference. And they have come there to make a lot of their product.
And what would you say today? I know that, you're kind of not fully in the Stuart Weitzman business anymore, so maybe you don't spend as much time over there.
Not at all in it.
But,
Fully, not at all. I sold it.
Nice work. That skilled labor situation today in Spain.
It's available.
Continue to be powerful, or is there a similar erosion?
No problem. Spain and Italy have enough workers to make what you want. Louis Vuitton, for example, just built a huge factory in Italy, and they had twice as many workers trying to get jobs as they needed. If you opened a factory in Haverhill in 1965, nobody would show up to work.
Why do you think that is? What's the
They
magic
were
over there?
there. Well, it's their heart and soul. It's a good paying industry, and it's so big. It's one of their biggest exports. The Spanish and the Italian industries. Now, China still makes 95% of all the shoes that the world buys, but those are still principally low price. They're all the athletic stuff, which includes Vietnam and Indonesia as part of that athletic world also. But in the medium to better grade footwear, Europe still makes the product that women buy.
And there's like a pride to it, maybe. Like
there is a pride
necessarily.
Yeah, in their. I mean, we brought that. We kind of brought that to Spain. They didn't have it when, like Halle Berry wore our shoes to the Academy Awards. So the picture of it, I brought like 30 of them over, and put them in. They hung them in the factories. The guys who cut the shoes cut on glass. That's the best surface to cut leather. And they would put these pictures under. They took away their Playboy pictures and they put in the pictures of our actresses wearing the shoes. Yeah, they had a pride in it. We made a shoe called the $1 Million Sandal.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody kind of knows about that. And the factory that made it, they actually put a giant replica of it on their roof. Wow, because we made it here in Elda in the Duncan factory. This is where that shoe was made.
Did it actually cost $1 million?
I had asked the Kwiat family for $1 million worth of diamonds, and they gave them to me.
On the nose.
Well, I had to convince the younger son who knew what marketing was about. The old guys were from the old school, but the son recognized that there was publicity in this, and they got plenty.
Going back a little before Halle Berry, I'm pretty sure you have an Aretha Franklin story
That's after Halle. Actually.
It was after.
I think so. Well, maybe before. Well, no,
Aretha. That kind of kickstarted.
Actually, Aretha Franklin. I was 83. So it was way before. Aretha Franklin was luck. But if you don't buy a lottery ticket, can you win the lottery?
It's probably pretty difficult. Yeah,
I think it's maybe impossible.
Yeah.
So we would always be out there buying lottery tickets, for celebrities and things. And I met a stylist at that job I took after my brother and I closed the plant. And we went to Europe. And that stylist, I called her when I began my company, which I began with one pair at a time kind of custom shoemaking, because I wanted to get into the celebrity world. And I told her, I said, I'm doing custom shoes. If you have a client, send me a picture of the dress and I'll sketch out some ideas. Maybe I'll get you a shoe that no one else on the red carpet will wear, because it'll be unique to whoever your client is. And she sent me this. She had signed up Aretha. I made the shoe to go what I thought would be a compliment to her chiffon-like dress. She loved it. She wore it. But there's where luck comes in. She had been a nominee for the Grammy. You don't know if she's going to win.
I mean, it's Aretha. Come on.
No. I'm sure the people alongside her are as good as her. You know how that works. And she won. And I said to the stylist before the event, they're not going to ask her on the red carpet about her shoes. I was hoping she'd be interviewed on the red carpet and could mention our name. I didn't see her on the stage. I said maybe she could say, after they finished with, the dress and the jewelry, and by the way, Stuart Weitzman made my shoes. Okay. She said, I don't know about that. I'll mention it, but, she wants to win her award. Well, she won it, and she thanked me on the stage and took off her shoes and showed them to the public.
She took them off.
Took them off, flashed them. She has the trophy in one hand and the shoes in the other. And thank you, Stuart Weitzman, for making me these absolutely comfortable and so beautiful shoes that I became shoemaker to the stars. There wasn't a stylist in Hollywood who didn't call me after that to make custom shoes for their clients. So that was luck. But we were there, right? We bought the ticket and it paid off.
Like she mentioned the comfort, right? Like I hear,
Oh, so comfortable and beautiful shoes. Yeah.
yeah, and
But women do that. When I stop a woman who's wearing, something beautifully elegant or sexy, and say, they're so comfortable. They don't say they are so beautiful or they go with my outfit or what. Everybody compliment. They're so comfortable. I just love your shoes because they're so comfortable. There has been a suffering of women, as evidenced by all the bunions in America on women's feet, from ill-fitting footwear. So when they found something on a heel that they could wear all day, it makes an impression.
it seems like a huge focus. And everybody I've talked to, got Stuart coming on the podcast, and I've been quite excited about it. So I've been telling people, and every woman I've talked to that has a pair of your shoes, comfort is the word, right? Love them, love the way they look.
How do you get them back?
Whatever.
You want them to come back into the store. They're not coming back if my shoes gave them a blister.
No, but I feel like that is historically at least tolerated by women in their shoes. How and not everybody's thinking that way from a manufacturing perspective or design perspective. How do you do it? You sold the business. You give it all away now, the information.
They haven't been able to do it
But like
without me, but it's another
seems not having worn a ton of women's shoes maybe since I was 4, tromping around in my mom's.
What do you mean worn a ton? How many do you wear?
There might be a picture of me floating around somewhere. But like, how is that accomplished? What approach do you take to make them comfortable, to have that be the first word that's coming out of people's mouths when they talk about shoes that to me do not look terribly comfortable?
I guess I've torn apart enough sneakers to figure out how they make them so comfortable with the cushioning and the wider fitting without pinching toes. And I didn't understand why the shoe industry hasn't thought like the athletic industry. To wear a pair of tennis shoes for 2 hours on a court versus wearing a heeled shoe for 6 hours, which has the chance of hurting the foot more? So you better make it I actually study the foot, where the nerves are that you don't want to have a strap or a top line cut into.
Mm-hmm.
And the last, that's the form we use, that's the heart of it. That's where it starts, obviously. The last should be exactly like the average woman's foot in that size, with 2 exceptions.
Okay.
The toe shape and the height of the heel. But every other measurement should work. And we were fanatical about that. Really fanatical about that. And other people didn't pay attention. That's just, there's a I want to look great attitude, or I want my friend to say, where'd you get those attitude that fashion instills in certain ladies. Not all, nothing's ever all, but in certain number, enough of them, let's say. And I read an interview of Madonna in Vogue, and she was being interviewed by Anna Wintour, actually, the big shot, right? Not just any editor. And the headline of the interview was a line from Madonna in the interview. Shoes are better than sex.
I think I remember that.
If you can play on that and make them feel good at the same time, I guess that's the road to success.
From a design perspective, like I love men's footwear, somewhat obviously. And there are places you can take it, but ultimately it seems significantly more limited than women's footwear in terms of just
Yes.
what you can do or what has been done by you and other great women's shoe designers. Seems like anything is possible. Where do you start to get to anywhere?
Well, you have to be inspired. And you can't sit in a closet and say, this is what women are going to wear next year and draw it out and hope they do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a world out there that you have to understand in clothing, in architecture, in taste, in movies, in trends. And you have to be a good student of that, a student of history. So many shoe books, you should have read them all, maybe 100 at least 100 shoe books of people's designs and the history of shoes. That, you know, you wouldn't study American history without reading about Civil War, the Revolutionary War. You shouldn't be in the shoe business if you haven't read every one of those books. So it starts there, and they're in your mind as reference as trends come up. Oh yeah, let me go back to that. There was a whole series done in that attitude. But I guess the biggest inspiration is the woman that I designed for. I never really thought of this in the way I'm going to describe it, but I was asked, how many different types of women do you cater to? And then I had to think and list and add, and it was over 12.
What do you got?
And I would think of, for example, Marilyn Monroe, who was before my time, but you know, that picture from 7-Year Itch with the dress floating up over the subway grating, one of the 5 most recognized photographs in the world. I think of her when I'm doing shoes for celebrities. And if I can sketch out of 50 sketches, if I can circle 2 of them, say, I know Marilyn would have worn that. I know I've got 2 shoes for Beyonce or Taylor Swift or whoever's the newcomer. And then I would think of Audrey Hepburn and her role, like in Breakfast at Tiffany's, which was in her time was Jackie Kennedy. They wore low heels and flats. They were so confident personally that they didn't need a high heel to augment their character, personality, or look. And I'd have to think about that kind of woman and design for her. And of course, the bride. It's a whole industry of brides' outfits from not just from veil to dress, but down to shoes. And I would think of the brides, and I would think of the lawyer. They want to look contemporary. So you have to think cool classic and think for the lawyer and the suburbanite. And then the athlete who is really, she's strong. And I think of all of these different kinds of women when I'm creating product, and each one is a muse. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific person like Audrey Hepburn. It could just be the character of that type of woman. And that's where it starts. But certainly I look at our industry and I look at contemporary clothing, related industries. I designed some beautiful heels based upon lines in architecture that I've noticed. Things like the saber. You know, the stiletto heel came from the round saber. And someone figured out how to make it strong enough so that it wouldn't snap. Single white female. I think they used Manolo Blahnik stiletto to
I never saw that one. I was too young.
Right through a guy who was trying to rape her, right through his temple. She saved herself. She took off from Manolo Blahnik. Went boom. And
Andy.
Sex in the City, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, one of the greatest lines ever was Carrie, Sarah Jessica Parker, is walking in an alley, and she's held up by knife point. Give me a bag. She says, this is my baguette. That was a famous bag name from Fendi. Everyone knew what the baguette was. It was the it bag. This is my baguette. I want your bag. I'm not giving you. I want your bag. And he gets closer. She says, here. And she throws him the bag. Now give me your shoes. She said, you can kill me. I'm not giving you my Manolos. Well, that made Manolo Blahnik famous. So shoes made it into the culture of the world, starting probably with Louis the 13th, 14th, who wore the high wedge and that was adopted by women to raise them up. But he was so short, he had to be as tall as the next guy in the court. And from then on out, that's the way it's been.
But like that is one of these big questions, right? Like why shoes? I obviously
Why not?
believe in it.
If that's
I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out myself.
I'm not a psychiatrist, and I don't care. But I recognize that shoes have a place in the life and heart of many women. They really do. And why they do, it's a buildup of years. But when I've read analysis of it, it's like any woman can wear a shoe, regardless of whether they're thin, overweight. Your foot doesn't really change, but maybe they can't wear the jeans or they can't wear the skirt, but they can wear the shoe, and they do. And you can change your outfit with the same clothing but a different shoe, and maybe a bag or a scarf, and the same outfit that costs you a lot more, you can keep using as long as you're fresh in your footwear. You got to get a woman on here and ask her why. She won't be able to tell you either. She'll just tell you she loves them. I mean, I have a question for you.
Hit me.
Here you are involved in men's shoes.
I think so,
I
yeah.
haven't touched them. Why wouldn't I'm not in the men's shoe business. And I had a very good reason to go in the women's business rather than the men's business. And because of my understanding, my knowledge of that reason, I wonder why in the world is he only in men's shoes? Because, let me ask you, how many pair of shoes do you think a man buys a year? Forget sneakers. How many pair of shoes do you think a man buys? The average man. Not you, but the average man.
American?
It doesn't matter where in the world.
4.
The answer is 1.5.
1.5. Not our audience.
How many pair of shoes do you think a woman buys?
8.
13.
Oh, no good.
These are figures based upon pairs sold in 2023 divided by the population of men and women in America. So who would you make shoes for? The 1.5 pair market or the 13 pair market? So there's something about it. Bette Midler said it better than anyone. You know who I'm talking about?
I do know who Bette Midler is, yes.
Give a girl the perfect pair of shoes, and she will conquer the world. Fortunately for the world, I haven't yet found the perfect pair of shoes.
She came pretty close.
Yeah, no, and sayings like there's a whole book of shoe sayings. If the shoe fits, standing in someone's shoes. Did you see Forrest Gump?
I have seen Forrest Gump.
Do you know the famous quote that everyone remembers from Forrest Gump?
Not the chocolate one.
That's the one they all remember.
Yeah.
Unless they're in the lady shoe business or in the shoe business. You should know the other one because you're in the shoe business, basically.
School me.
He's sitting on the bench with the old lady waiting to visit Jenny, his love, who's dying of AIDS. He doesn't know it. And they're talking, and he's acting his, wonderful sense. Tom Hanks does such a good job in that role. But he's looking down the road, and this man is approaching, and he never took his eyes off the guy, and he followed him away until he couldn't see him anymore. And the lady sitting next to him said, "Forrest, why are you looking at that man's feet?" And he said, "My mama told me you can tell a lot about a person by their shoes, where they've been and where they're going." That's the line that sticks with me, and it's true.
Yeah, it's probably better than the chocolate one because you open up the box and they
They're
often
both
tell
fine.
you exactly
They're both
what
fine,
the
but I'm in the shoe.
Always
business,
wondered about that. Yeah.
Remember that.
The kind of the talk of creativity and process and how it all comes about, I think could be contrast with that experience you had when you drew your first pair. Okay, who'd you copy these from?
Yeah.
And you didn't. But
Well,
I'm
you know
sure it
something.
happens.
What do they say? A rotten apple spoils the whole bushel. If I made a shoe and the buyer of Saks walks in and says, "Oh," she picks it up. She says, "I'm going to buy this because I had something almost identical from Jimmy Choo last year." That's a knife in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes away credibility on my creativity. So you have to be very careful not to pay attention to your competitors because you'll get trapped sometimes
Yeah, it gets stuck in your
doing
head.
too much what they do. You have to look outside of your competitors for ideas if you're looking for inspiration outside. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there really isn't. One of my favorite mantras or quotes that stuck with me from the beginning of my career when I was visiting the Picasso Museum in Barcelona. It's only about an hour from the shoe area where I was. And there's a quote from Picasso from an interview. And the interviewer had the gall to ask him, "Do you ever copy, Mr. Picasso?" He didn't hesitate. He said, "Yes, all the time. I copy from poets, from nature, from music." What was he saying? He's inspired
Mm-hmm.
all the time. So inspiration is the way to go. But real copycatting will only ruin it for you in the end.
I'm sure people have knocked off your shoes, though. How's that feel?
It's a compliment. How would it feel if nobody copied my shoes? What would that say about my business?
Not worth copying.
That's not good, is it? So you have to look at it as a compliment. You can't let it drive you crazy. And I don't. A few times we've tried to protect certain shoes successfully because they're going to maybe be long-standing. But generally, we're on to the next thing. And that's just the way fashion is.
In terms of inspiration, I've spent the last couple of weeks with this book right here,
Oh, Walk This Way.
Walk This Way,
Mm.
which is a collection of, I believe there's an intro from Stuart Weitzman, and then some very knowledgeable people kind of talking about these historical shoes that some in here, made by yourself, made by your father, but many of them
Most of them, just older than
just
we are,
old,
yeah.
just
Yeah,
really
but
old,
it's
wonderful
not
shoes.
just pictures of old, wonderful shoes. There's a story
Oh yeah,
that tells the cultural nature of America or England or Europe that led to the creation of shoes of the way they looked. It had to, shoes followed the culture of society. First with the heel going up, and then the platform created originally to keep women's shoes out of the mud.
mm-hmm.
And that the one you're on right now, the high button shoe, which I remade, by the way, for Phantom of the Opera, and they used it for years as their staple shoe. That shoe was made because of women's suffrage. Women couldn't wear skirts that allowed their ankles to show. I don't think it's hard to recognize how things were 150 years ago or so. And then they liberated themselves, first by getting the vote. And they decided every designer of everything we wear is a man. We're not going to tolerate that anymore. We're going to wear what we want to wear. And women started shortening the dresses that were available in stores because the men still wouldn't make them. And the ankles started to get show. And there was such a backlash
Chaos.
that they then had to create what we did. We created a high button shoe that covered your ankle, so it didn't matter if you raised your dress, you're still proper. It's sort of like today, women who like a miniskirt will wear it with black tights. They see it as an extension of the miniskirt. Well, the high button shoe is an extension of the shorter dress. And these things follow cultural aspects of our society. Another reason why footwear is so dominant as an accessory. It's, maybe one of the reasons that we talk about shoe fetishes.
One of my favorites from that cultural kind of perspective is like in the 20s, they had to make shoes comfortable enough to like dance constantly.
Mhm.
I never really thought about that
With
before, and it
straps.
completely had to change the form.
Yeah, they had straps on them. They had broader based heels,
Yeah,
so they could dance. The flapper era
yeah.
um, held the foot better. A pump couldn't do that. Um, yeah, so we followed what society was doing. Sometimes we launched it, but mostly followed what the society was doing.
Where'd you get all these shoes?
My wife did me a favor eventually after 4 ties that she had bought me for. Oh, that's a great shoe. After 4 ties,
Yankees.
Joe DiMaggio's girlfriend's shoe. She, I never wore the ties she bought me. So you went to a flea market once to buy some things and saw shoes and started to buy them. And over the course of, we have over 300 of them. Great shoes, really antique. Queen Victoria's shoe that she wore when she married Prince Albert. There's some terrific.
Picked up at a flea market. Yeah.
Yeah, right, for not a flea market price. Little flat shoe. But the Joe DiMaggio shoe, that's a cute story. We have time for that story?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Big Yankee fan.
Well, you cut something else out if you have to, because this story is worth hearing. So Joe DiMaggio was a rookie, New York Yankees, still with his high school girlfriend. Marilyn hadn't entered his life yet. And he said, I'm going to bring you, honey, I'm going to bring you home a signed baseball by all the Yankees. And she just leaned over, took off her brown and white spectator pump, that's what the design is called, and said, could they sign my shoes instead? And that is the only pair of footwear signed by an entire team of any sport.
It's great. All my favorite things.
That I bought at auction. That's quite a prize. Hated to give it up to the museum, but everyone can see it now.
So in terms of that, you have obviously a collection of, your archive, Mr. Seymour, and then these historical shoes.
Celebrity shoes and jewel shoes. Shoes made like expensive stuff.
And you've been just keeping them all in your small closet, just in a raggedy pile, I'm sure. And a certain portion of these are going to historic New England at this new shoe museum that's kind of being constructed right now, correct?
Haverhill. But and another portion is going to be has already been given and is going to be on display permanently, perpetually, as they say, in a Stuart Weitzman shoe collections museum. Not just the historical shoes, but original shoes of my design and celebrity shoes that were uniquely made for individuals whose names we all know, and then jewelry shoes. So those all 4 collections will be on display, as well as, by the way, another thing my wife did that was phenomenal. When we first opened the store, because our footwear was different in some way, and the way we marketed and our advertising was unique, as I mentioned, always mention on that road less traveled, which is a poem I fell in love with as a high school kid, because I thought it was cool that you're not doing what everyone else does. She had created with artists, artistic shoes. There's a whole nother book on that called Art and Soul, S-O-L-E, pardon the pun.
Solid pun.
Yeah, Art and Soul, with the art shoes that adorned our windows on Madison Avenue and Las Vegas and other places where we opened. And they won awards from the Chamber of Commerce in the communities because they were so different. Everyone just puts product in the window. And we put these amazing works of art in the window, which lured people in to see, wow, this is a creative company. Let's see what their shoes look like, kind of thing. It was a very successful campaign in opening new shoe stores. So that collection of art shoes will also be on display.
Why do you think these kind of donations and preservation are important?
what are we going to do with them? You know, I mean, these tell history. If you read Walk This Way, you see they talk about history, cultural history. If I've can contribute to it through my wife's selection of shoes at all these different places, they shouldn't disappear. I'm happy that there are museums who agreed with me and are willing to build facilities to show them off.
You going to miss those Yankee shoes?
Yeah, but it's okay. It's still in the Stuart Weitzman Museum in New York at the Historical Society.
What shoe have you made that sums up Stuart Weitzman, the brand? You got to pick one.
The Nudist.
I think it's in that book.
No, this is my shoe. That's Antique Shoes, that book.
All right, I've seen it then.
Every woman knows the Nudist, even by name. The Nudist is a high heel, originally. We made it for normal ladies too, but a very high heel, 2-strip sandal. The back is closed. The top strip's around the ankle. And if you watch next year's Academy Awards, or last year's, or the one before, or the 10 before that, at least a third of the women are in that shoe. And when it was first worn, the top stylist and editor of Hollywood Reporter wrote, Stuart Weitzman's Nudist sandal will change the red carpet forever. Now, in fashion, nothing is forever. But he said that, and so far he's been right, even though it's at least 12, 15 years. It is the shoe that does everything. And every day somebody else is wearing it. Just the other day, Taylor Swift was walking around town in it, even though most ladies couldn't walk around town in it. You know, they can go to an event in it. That shoe says what we did to accommodate women, solve problems in the shoe industry, and create something iconic. And I say solve problems because that shoe was promoted by me to solve a very serious problem we had when we would make shoes for all these celebrities. And if they changed their dress at the last minute, the shoe I made them didn't work. The stylist had to find something from someone else's closet that would work. And we would lose up to 30% of all that work we put in. We'd lose 30% of them. So I realized we needed a shoe that they never had to change, regardless of what they do with their outfit. And this shoe is so simple, and nothing's harder to design than simplicity. I can tell you, you can decorate things all the time and appeal to a lot of people, but simple is hard because it really it eliminates the unnecessary and shows only the necessary. And when it's naked like that, it better be great. And this one is. And it didn't matter what dress they wore. We made that shoe in white satin, dyeable in all the Pantone colors, or silver and gold, so they could be worn metallic as well. And between those 3 color combinations, white to anything and silver and gold, we never lost another celebrity. So it solved a problem, created an iconic shoe for me, and gave us almost a logo brand name to for people to recognize. And it is, which you can't see on a podcast, but I'll show you, it is my logo.
Is that your tennis shirt?
Yeah, that's what I'll be playing tennis with today.
There it is. I got to get one of those. What about a shoe that best represents or sums up Stuart Weitzman, the person?
No, shoes aren't about me, the person.
Never.
My company, you know, and it's my hobby, the shoe business. So, no, they don't relate to me as a person.
Yeah.
They relate to women that I want to satisfy.
You think you've done a pretty good job of that?
Well, do you have a wife?
I do.
Ask her.
She knows. Yeah. I mean, I think that's it, right? Like the customer is ultimately
Yeah.
who you have to serve, right? The wearer. Not even, I mean, purchasing is one part, but
If you're in a
they got to want to wear them,
if
right?
you are in a consumer product business, you have to know what it costs you to get a customer. Acquisition costs, they now call it. I never used that
They didn't
word.
teach you that at Wharton.
I just knew this is what it cost me to get that lady. And in our end, and for me, it was $8,000. In all the publicity I could run and the celebrities I could give shoes to and getting it out there. And then a woman comes in, gee, I want the shoe Beyonce had, or I want the shoe that Diane Kruger had. $8,000
Per customer?
First time she came in. No, there are many customers come in because they've had shoes before.
Yeah.
But for the get her the first time,
Yeah.
you think I want to make a shoe that's going to give her a blister or hurt her baby toe and she'll never walk in again, chase her away after spending all that money to get her in the first time? So if you make a consumer product, the one promise you better keep is the promise of what you tell them you're going to give them. Keep that promise, because you'll never get another chance. And if you say our shoes are comfortable, or this shoe is so trend right, your friends will admire it, you better hope that it does something like that, because that's why she bought it. That's what I call the promise of the product.
There it is. Thank you so much, Stuart.
But my
coming
pleasure.
on. Teaching me some things about a world that I've long admired, but I think only just begun to kind of understand today.
Okay, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, we're throwing all these boots out behind me and just
You have to make
filling
some
up the
shelves
rack.
now for high heel shoes
Yeah,
and flats too,
of course,
but ladies only.
whole range.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Pleasure to have
Stuart.
been here. Bye-bye.